So in this section we will be constructing the buildings, and you will use lightweight chipboard for this step. It takes about 8 sheets, and lightweight chipboard that I'm using is 0.030. It's a little bit more than half as thick as the medium weight chipboard that has been used so far in the project. So there are 2 things that will help you be successful with this step. Number 1, there's a layout that shows how to maximize the cutting for each sheet of the chipboard to get all of the pieces out. Now this is not to scale. There's a second sheet that tells you exactly what the dimensions for each one of these pieces are. But this also indicates the stiffness to have the chipboard in. That means that if you pick it up, if it's hard to bend this way, that's the stiffness direction. So I have that oriented this way right now. The red are the buildings and the blue are the roofs. And as we cut each piece, it's very important to mark it with the designation so that you don't get confused about which building it is or which roof it is. The buildings get marked with their building number and their building size. The roofs just have their building number. And that information is on this more detailed chart, the cutting and scoring chart for all the buildings and roofs. This includes information for every building, the size of the building that it is, and on the bottom it tells the sizes, then the kind of roofs that are on it, and the cutting for sizes for the roof, cutting sizes for the building, and with little tick marks that allow you to keep track of what you've done. Now in the next step we're going to be doing the scoring, so to begin with all you need to know is the cutting piece and to make sure that you label things as you go along. So I'll be back after I've done my cutting. So I finished all my cutting of the lightweight chipboard for my buildings and the roofs, and you want to take your time and be careful and cut them accurately. I did check all of mine and I found that I had cut one just a little bit short, and so probably good to have an extra piece of the lightweight chipboard around in case you make an error as well. So the roofs, we're just going to set them aside. We don't need them for a while. And here is our stack of buildings, and the first thing we're going to do is score them 3 times so that we can make them into a building. And the scores depend on the building size, and so it's easiest to do this task if you separate them into 5 stacks based on the building size. And the building size is the second number. For example, in this one it's a building size 1. Here you can see building 6. Over here that's a building size 2. So I know 1 through 5 are building size 1, and then I'll just kind of take this stack. 6 through 9 are building size 2. Oops, I'm sorry, 6 through 10. 11 through 17, 18 are building size 3. 19, 20, and 21 are 4. And 22 through 24 are 5. So let's just put everything aside except for building size 1, and we'll start with that. Now this is lightweight chipboard, so it is possible, if you're slow and careful, to score it with a scoring board. If you don't have a scoreboard or don't feel comfortable doing that, just use a ruler at the dimensions and an embossing tool or a scoring tool. So let's look at our chart. And what we'll notice here, now we're going to start first with the wall scoring. It's the blue columns, and it says long side top, and we're going to make 3 scores. And each building size, you can see there's a big line in between them here. Each building size, the first score is at the same place, and the second score, the third score are all the same for each building size. So for all of your building ones, for instance, we'll do the first score at 1.5 inches, the second score at 3, and the third score at 4.5 inches. So that's how to read this chart. The building size for this first scoring is just depends on the size and not the specific building number at this point. So I keep this right in front of me to refer to. And here's my first building 1. And the first score is at 1.5 inches. The second score is at 3. And the third score is at 4.5. And I would repeat that for all of my building size 1. So for building size 2, when we look at our chart, building size 2, the scores are 1 3/4, 3 1/2, and 5 1/4. So I'll just take one of my building 2s, and these are all of these scores can be made on this small scoreboard. You don't need the big one for this. They're all within 6.5 inches. So I said 1 3/4. I'm not trying to remember. Right in front of me, I kept my scoring diagram. 3 1/2 and 5 1/4. And all the building size 2s would be done that same way. And we would carry on with the building 3s following their scoring guide, the building 4s, their scoring guide, and the building 5s, their scoring guide. So I'm going to complete that task, and then we'll come back and look at the next section. So now I've completed the first set of scoring. See if there, I think the light's picking that up on each one of the buildings, all 24. Now we're going to look at the scoring that we do with the short side on top. And there is no scoring of this is the green column, so we're here at the end. But the 3 buildings with flat roofs do not get any scoring. So you can either pull them out, or you just pay attention when it'll say none and none when we get here. So how this works is, what we're doing is each of the roofs has a gable, and that is the kind of roof that is pointed at the top, except for the 3 flats. So in order to accomplish this, on 2 opposite sides we're going to make a score to bend this roof into this peak, and you can see on the other 2 sides that it's flat. So what we're going to do now is make this scoring on these 2 opposite sides. Now, just to add some interest, sometimes if the building is a rectangle, sometimes we're scoring on the long wall, and sometimes we're going to score on the short wall. Obviously, if a building is a square, both walls are the same length. So I just usually designate the second and the fourth wall as the long walls and use these numbers over here. Just as long as it doesn't really matter if it's the first and the third or the second and the fourth wall for squares, but just to keep consistency, I'll try to, for squares, do the second and the fourth wall when it says long wall here. So let's get started. So this scoring starts with the short side up at the top, and that's what it says right here on our green thing, short side at the top. And then what we're going to do is measure in from the left the distance that it says here. And for example, here on building 1, it says 2, and that all these are in inches, so it's 2 inches up, and we're going to score that on the second and fourth walls. Now I find now that you need to do this scoring with a ruler and an embossing tool of some kind. You can't start and stop very easily on this heavy duty or heavier material on a scoreboard. Now I can see here where, you know, in my lighting, where these score lines are. If you can't see, you could come in here and put a light pencil mark or something so that you can see them, but I can see well enough. And the other thing is you could use your mat, of course, to measure up. So looking again up at my green chart, it says this is 2 inches. This is a 2-inch wide ruler here that I have, and I'm going to make my score line on, there's the second wall and there's the fourth wall. Now there's one other thing that I want to do, just so that I make sure that I keep the building oriented correctly when I go to cut the walls, and that is on the walls where I did not mark a score line, so that in this case it would be the first and the third. I'm just going to make a little V or an arrow, and just so that it reminds me that that's the direction of the gables. I'm not sure if you can see that, so I'm just making a V like this, so it reminds me that that's the direction of the gables. And so what we've done, just to repeat here, we looked at our chart, we followed across for our building size, and on this one it's 2 inches on the long wall. Since it's a square, I did that on the second and fourth walls. This was my 2 inches. I scored on the second and the fourth walls, and I made my 2 little arrow V's pointing towards the right on the walls that I did not score. So basically we'll follow that for every single one here, except for, like you can see, as we get to building 6 is a flat, so there wouldn't be any scoring. Just put that one aside when you get to it. Let's do one of these that's on the short wall. Okay, here's number 12. Let's do number 12. It says it's on the short wall, and there's no scoring on the long wall. So 12, well, let me find 12 over here. There's 12, and we're going to do 3 inches on the short wall. Now in this ruler obviously is only 2 inches wide. You could, so I can use my mat and just come up my 1/3 inch, or a bigger ruler. So now I'm up 3 inches. The short walls, I'm not sure if you can see the score lines. Here's a score line, score line, score line. So the short walls are the first and the third walls here, and that's what we're going to score at 3 inches. So there is my first short wall and my second short wall. And then before I take this away, I want to make sure that on the walls I did not score, that I put my V's. And you don't have to do them very dark. I'm just trying to do them darker so that you can see. So that is the process for scoring. You'll do that for, follow this green columns for all of the buildings, and I will do that, and then we'll be back for the next step. finished the second set of scoring, and I have them, all of the ones with gable roofs, I've made their second scoring and put the little arrow, directional arrows on them. And so now we're ready to do some cutting and prep to finally turn them into three-dimensional buildings. So I want you to take and orient your piece for cutting so that these arrows that we drew are pointing towards you. Always want to point towards you. And then what we're going to do is cut on the vertical score lines, but only up to the point where it intersects a horizontal score line. I'm going to take on this one and come in with some pen just so you can see what I mean. Darken the score lines here. So those are the score lines. And what I want to do is take a scissor and cut on the vertical score lines, but only until I get to that horizontal score line. So I'm stopping when I get to this line. And we'll cut all three scores. And we're going to do that for every building except for the three that are flats. So again, let's do it one more time. We make sure that it is oriented with the arrows. Let me darken my arrows, with the arrows facing towards you. So we're cutting down from the top, and then we're going to cut as far as the horizontal score line on all three of the vertical score lines. You can do this with a craft knife. You can, I find it easy just to do it with scissors. Here's a pair of the big scissors, big Tim Holtz scissors. Whatever you feel most comfortable with, try to stop as close to that horizontal score line as possible. So we're going to do all of the buildings, and then we'll be back to put them together. Now that we've done all of our cutting, we're ready to put our buildings together. So let's just start here with building number 1. Now we want to do some bending to turn it into the 3 dimensions. I find that if I bend it towards the side I scored, that the corners are a little bit nicer. You can do it however you choose. I just gently come a little bit more than 90 on the 3 vertical scores, and then on the 2 horizontal scores they just have to come in a little bit. So you can see we're starting to get our little building. So now we want to join with some of our cardstock joining strips. We're going to put one along the wall and one on one of the folded ends of the roof. So let me cut that here. I just taper my edges a little bit when I make these cuts. Okay. Keep my garbage bowl handy. If you fold it in, obviously the building number is going to be on the inside, but I can still read it, so that's not a problem. And then go ahead and burnish that, and then you just want to put this on one of the roofs that has the bend in it. So to join this, these seams are going to basically butt together. You could flatten it down in order to do this and line it up. I think it puts a lot of stress on these folds, so I generally don't do that. I just kind of hold it in my hand and get that join nice. Try to keep it straight. Once you've made that wall join, reach in there and burnish where you just attached. And then come up here, take off this score tape backing. Line up the roof there so it's a nice point there, and then reach inside to give that a burnish. So you end up with something that looks like this. Now you can either go through and do all of the buildings to this point, but at this point I find it easy just to complete the process of cutting off the gable ends. Just give the building a little squeeze so that the roof line is captured tautly in between the two ends. Take your scissors and cut right along that edge. Don't let go. Turn it around so you can get your scissors on the other side and trim that corner. Don't let go. Come around and do the other side. We're going to come back and just gently pull out these eaves a little bit, and with some wet glue we'll glue them in. So I'm just pulling that out a little bit. Nope, so I can get some. It's okay if some glue gets on this roof, because remember we cut all those little roof pieces, so it's going to get covered up. Give this a little squeeze. Get rid of glue, extra glue on. Just hold that for a second till the glue does its initial set. And then let it set aside to dry while you do the next one. So that's putting together the little buildings. Let me do another one for you. I'm going to do one that's kind of a bigger rectangle down here in the fours. Those are pretty good sized buildings. Alright, so here's a 4. Now this one, you probably can't see on camera, but I got off track when I was scoring, and that might happen to you as well. So if it does, just take a ruler or something and hold it on the proper score line, so you don't fold it on the, where you went off track. I'm just giving these the gentle folding like I did before. The only real difference is that it's taller. Some of them have a longer peak to the roof. Just to add interest. There's nothing that says you can't, have all of your buildings be the exact same size. I just like to have a variety of things going on. put one of our score tapes along the wall up to the corner where the roof bends, and the other one always goes on the bendy roof. We'll burnish. Get that lined up nicely. Reach in here and give it a burnish. You can't reach all the way on one side, flip it around and burnish. It's good. It's important to get a good burnish there. Then score tape off the roof. Use the two ends that will be the gable to help you line up the ends of the cut roof, and a little pinch there helps keep the line. And now I'm giving it the good pinch. Use your big scissors here as well. I wouldn't recommend a craft knife for this step. And then again, we put glue in our two ends. The only exception to putting this together is building 24. And that is only if you want to turn it into, I have an option where it turns into a church, and you can put a tea light inside to light up the windows. And if you want to do that, you will just put building 24 to the side. And we will put it together when we cut out the windows. Now, if you don't want to do that option and have cut out openings for the windows, just do building 24 just like all the others. I put this blue marker on here just so I remember to stop, because I'm going to do that on my version. So, continue on to make all of those buildings, and then we'll be back for the next step.